I remember feeling pain. I was continuously bleeding. It hurt to use the restroom, but it was never something that was discussed even after it happened.
Circumcising young girls is considered a rite of passage in some countries in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East, but it isn't unique to just those regions. The harmful practice goes by many names, though it's usually referred to as female genital mutilation, or FGM.
So I was 6.
I was 7 years old.
I was 11 years old when my clitoris was forcefully amputated.
My mother took me to my relative's house in a basement in New York.
It's the most horrific, excruciating pain I've ever experienced in my life.
Religion, tradition, sexual control. I continue to hear those same reasons over and over again.
FGM is not a Muslim thing. FGM is not a culture thing. It's a C thing, which is control.
A recent Michigan case revealed to many that the practice is also happening in the U.S.
When I first heard about the Michigan case, I wasn't surprised because I knew it was happening in the country, on American soil.
But I was surprised that law enforcement knew about it and were actively pursuing these cases.
Up until the 1950s and 60s, doctors and health professionals would perform clitoridectomies, which is a type of female genital cutting, on women to treat what they said was hysteria, or to treat lesbianism, or to stop people from masturbating.
Anything that has to do with sex is very taboo in our culture.
I was always told that this is a sensitive woman's issue, so it's not something you're supposed to really talk about. And I just accepted that.
The practice is hard to detect since it takes place underground. We spoke to a woman who was cut in Texas when she was about 9 years old. She was raised in the Daudi Boer community, a Muslim sect with roots in India.
We traveled to a different city for it to happen, and we ended up stopping in a strip mall, kind of like an abandoned store. I remember it being super empty, almost kind of like a doctor's office. While it was happening, the only, explanation or description of what was going on was just, there's something dirty on our bodies. We need to clean it up and we need to get rid of it. If you didn't do this, you might get blacklisted from the community. It was just never a topic of conversation. You would never sit down with your girlfriend and be like, hey, by the way, have you gotten this done? Because nobody talks about it, and until recently.
Her experience took place a few years after a federal ban on FGM was passed in 1996. But in December, a district judge in Michigan ruled the federal law against FGM infringed on states' rights. The judge's ruling meant that 2 Detroit doctors and 6 others who helped subject at least 9 girls to the procedure were cleared of FGM-related charges. In April, Trump's Department of Justice announced that it would not defend the federal ban. That set off outrage from activists and policymakers. For now, it's up to states to criminalize FGM.
I do believe it should be criminalized.
It sends a message. It says, look, this is something that we don't tolerate.
Just like we have in Virginia, 25 to life. Yeah, that would be perfect.
It would probably be wrong to take children away from parents.
In terms of who should be prosecuted, I have very complicated feelings on that, and I'm not quite sure what the right answer is.
Since the Michigan case, 4 states successfully passed FGM laws, but 17 states still don't have any. So activists have stepped in. For the past year, a Virginia-based advocacy group has been going to police departments in the D.C. metro area to educate police officers on what FGM is and how to spot it.
Just because we haven't had more reported cases in the U.S. doesn't mean that it's not happening. It's important for you to know the reluctance, the signals that FGM was done or is about to be done. The perpetrators, who are they? They are the parents, people whom the girls trust. That's who do it to them. And please, I always tell the police, don't use the family members as interpreters. They are not going to be truthful. They are going to tell you the wrong thing because they will not want to admit what has happened to the girl.
The private and taboo nature of the practice makes it extremely difficult to know how many people have been affected by FGM in the U.S. And it makes it just as difficult for survivors to speak up.
It's a traumatic experience. Psychologically, you're done.
I was afraid to talk about it for years and years.
If you start talking about this, you can be seen as someone who is against the community.
Activists say survivor stories are a critical part of prevention and healing, so they're creating safe spaces for them. This monthly support group is meeting for the first time.
My name is F.A., and of course, I'm a survivor of FGM. I'm not ashamed to talk about it. I'm not afraid to talk about it. The stories may be different, but our pain is the same.
Most of the women were cut as young girls in their home countries. We agreed not to show some of their faces.
The most painful aspect of it, I saw my sister, my junior sister. She was almost dying. She was losing so much blood. So much blood. It was traumatic.
How old was she?
She was a baby. She was like 6 months then.
Oh, wow. For two of the women, this is the first time they actually talked about what happened to them, even though they were babies when it happened to them.
We should really target men, because they're the one that's saying it's for guys. So if we target that population, I believe most likely, chances are very high, sooner or later, it will turn around.
Anti-FGM advocates want lasting change to start within practicing communities. The Michigan case especially put a spotlight on the Boer community, which is seeing pockets of resistance to FGM. This spring, SAIO, a storytelling organization, brought together Boer women from around the country to discuss their activism.
There are very few opportunities where people can come together to really talk about this issue and create in a safe environment too. Even for those who do feel that this is a sort of outdated practice or this is something that's needed, there's still that shame to help others do it because of the feeling of what will others think. And that's something that's also can be seen common in FGC, what will others think.
Earlier this year, over 40 community and advocacy groups formed the nation's first anti-FGM network. It could be what survivors need to scale their efforts.
People are recognizing that this is an issue here. It has been for a long time, but it's finally getting that attention.
Until the survivors themselves come out in droves, come together, join the anti-FGM activists, we're not going to make a headway.
Talking about something is such a powerful thing.
The more accepted it becomes to talk about any of these things that are going on will lead to more accountability, and that leads to more public discussion, and that's where things shift.